Kentucky beats Akron 35-3 in another game that, Cats won. Mark Stoops summed it up the best. We won by 30, and I'm still mad. Except he's used a little different language, which I will leave to him. Week for me, and I was very excited to watch the game tonight because I thought, all right, Freddie tells me that Akron has an anemic offense, so they won't really be able to score, but a decent defense, so let's see how we do. And you could kind of, depending on how you want to look at it, you could look at a lot of positives. I'll start with those. I thought Devin Leary looked really good. Couple bad passes, but I think, and then this was sort of said by the coordinators, by the coaches after the game, that some of them were receivers running bad routes and miscommunication. I thought he put the ball in a place to be caught most of the time. The only interception was when it was clear they didn't have the same route in their mind with Dane Key. And I thought he hit what he needed to do most of the time. Obviously had the amazing play with Ray Davis, which was one of the better plays I can remember. I mean, just in terms of two individuals making amazing plays. I mean, Leary, I thought, was certainly sacked and then got the ball to Davis, who basically ran past the entire team. So I thought he played well. The running back position, I mean, I think, there were people out there whispering that Ray Davis could be as good as Benny and Chris Rodriguez, if not better. And you hadn't really seen that. Well, you saw it tonight. I mean, he has an ability. He's not as good as those guys at sort of just going straight ahead and getting you 4 or 5 yards, but he can break them, and he can be game changing, and he can turn a game around in just a second. And there's, Kentucky hasn't had a lot of those guys. Probably the last guy that was really like that, I don't know. I mean, we haven't had a ton at running back, but we got one here who can, just completely with one move around the corner change the game. And it reminds me in some ways that's kind of how Lynn Bowden was, even though he wasn't a running back. That's exciting. They got the tight ends involved. A lot of catches at tight end, targeted a lot. For the most part, made the plays. That was good. I thought the defense was very good throughout the game. I mean, they gave up a lot of yards there at the end, and there was one drive in the second half where they gave up yards. But in general, the defense was solid. As I was watching, you saw Hairston was the guy who made a ton of plays, and the safeties played well. But, the defensive line, when you're watching the game, especially on downs, like passing downs, watch how many guys it takes for them to block Deion Walker. He doesn't make a ton of tackles, but that's because he is double, and I saw a play where he's triple teamed this game. That's why you see Trevin Wallace and Derek Jackson making a lot of the plays they make. So those are the positives to me. You see, there were a lot of things that if you want to be positive about, you can find. Negatives. I mean, I continue to be amazed at how often this team will make the worst mistake it can make in a situation. The Jordan Dingle, that was a great catch and a great run. It's 7-0. Your offense has not completely clicked. That team's offense is terrible. Just get it to a 2-possession game, and he fumbles while trying to carry 4 guys to the end zone. That's probably a bad decision. 2 offensive linemen really struggled. Cortland Ford struggled, and Jagger Burton struggled a lot. The holding penalty was the most obvious, but there were other issues throughout the game. I mean, pretty much when guys got in the backfield early, it was kind of at those 2 positions. And those are 2 guys that I think people probably thought would both be upgrades where they are, and they need to play like upgrades because they just haven't yet. So that's frustrating. It still feels like to me at wide receiver, you got to see, Tavion Robinson get some catches. That was the Brown Stevens, if it hadn't gotten, brought back, was a great catch. But, it doesn't seem like Dane Key is in completely the right place. A couple mismanaged routes, another drop pass. He seems frustrated out there. As you know, if you listen to this show, that's a hard conversation for all of us to have because we're all so close to him. But it's clear that's not completely going perfectly. Barian Brown had a drop. So, that's a little frustrating. But overall, I feel like the story of this game is the story of the last two games, which is they are 2 or 3 plays away in all of these games from winning by 40 and it not even being close. But then they make huge, huge mistakes. And you can get by with that in these games. But starting next week, and even more to an extent the next week, you're not going to be able to get by with them anymore. I mean, you go to Vandy, they beat you last year. Now, we should win, but they beat you last year. Now, they lost tonight to UNLV, so they're not that great. But they did beat you last year, and you can't make these mistakes in that game. And then Florida pounds Tennessee in a very surprising result to me, and that's going to be the next home game in 2 weeks. And your margin for error is not going to be as great against those teams. And there's just – it feels like there hasn't been a game where you can say, okay, that was easy. Now, what's interesting is if you heard the pregame show – I think Freddie made the point that in the last however many games where Kentucky's played non-conference opponents, so Louisville and the 3 stinky teams every year, Kentucky is 15-4 against the spread. They covered the spread again tonight. So now they're 16-4 against the spread. That's an amazing number, 80% against the spread. They've covered the spread 2 of the 3 games this year. But yet it still doesn't really feel like it. And I don't know whether to sort of chalk that up to, I'm a big believer. People will remember the first thing and the last thing. Our beginnings are not great. And I wonder if we had a good first drive tonight, but I wonder if we played like we did in the second half in these games in the first half, would we look at all this differently? I don't know. But it still doesn't feel like Kentucky has completely connected. I still like where they are, though. I mean, I still think, and in this SEC, nobody's great. Alabama was losing to South Florida. Tennessee lost by 13 tonight at Florida. South Carolina played well today, but lost to North Carolina. All these teams we played have flaws. Our flaw seems to be mistakes. If we can clean those up, I like this team. But when you have 3 straight games of mistakes, at some point you have to say, is that a pattern, and can they get out of it? And I think that's going to be the question. They have Vandy, Florida, Georgia, Missouri. Put Georgia to the side. Vandy, Florida, and Missouri are 3 teams that if you play the way you should play, you should or could win all of those games. You also could lose all of those games. And the question for Kentucky football in 2023, for me, is can they get at least 2, if not all 3 of those? If they can, this can be a great season. If they don't, I think we'll look back and be very disappointed because it gets awfully harder on the back end.